Morning, Sara.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Sort of settled now. That's good.
Good.
Right, shall I?
Very nice.
Well, here's a Paul Evans.
I don't think you can hear you yet.
I can't hear me.
Good morning. How are we?
We're pretty okay considering. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to assume that that's not a real background.
I live in a Tudor mansion, Paul. Have I not mentioned this?
Is that a Tudor mansion?
It's the set from Blackadder 2.
Oh right. Okay.
Yeah.
I suppose they did look that rich. Have you seen that? In the House of Commons, the old Augustus Welby Pugin.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he did he did mock Tudor, didn't he? He did. His stuff was very. He was early 19th century.
I was going to say he was pre-Victorian, wasn't he? Because he was earlier than that.
He was early 19th century, yeah, but he was also a closet Catholic. So he used to. So a lot of his stuff was he used to, everything stopped with the Reformation as far as he was concerned.
Right, shall I do a quick practice at a screen share here just to see that the technology is working? So share screen, that one there. Yeah, you guys are getting that?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
good.
That's
Brilliant. Okay, I will stop that for the moment.
And what I'll do is I'll just do a brief intro where I'll talk about what we're doing is we're working with a production branch now we've never really had a comprehensive production branch rate card before. And we are doing that. We're stressing firstly that they need to stick together on their norms before they stick together on terms.
Yeah.
So they need to have a way of doing it. In fact, I've got a couple of slides that I could start with.
I'm just a bit wary about time, actually, Paul. That's the only thing. If we start getting into a full-blown presentation.
No, I'm just thinking of something that'll only take it'll take about 5 minutes just as a outline. It's up to you. I'm easy. I think let's just do it verbally. I'll just.
Okay. So these are sort of members from the production office of various levels working across scripted and non-scripted. It's
scripted and non-scripted, and there's also some ADs on this call as well.
Oh, right, okay, cool.
Now, at the last minute, there was something, and I don't know whether this was discussed with you, Sarah, and it's something that at the last minute we decided to invite non-members, and our branches said that's okay, but we have to charge them something.
Right.
Now, I've just realised, of course, what we're doing is we're charging for a meeting that you're speaking at. We haven't discussed that with you, and I've.
Really, that's absolutely fine. Really, don't put it in the coffers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the money is the money's not the point. The point is that we say members get Bectu stuff free.
Free, yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
And it's not. I mean, I think we probably made about 30 quid from it.
Whoa!
but it will. We'll get another nice bottle of wine soon, anyway.
Thank you. No, it's an absolute pleasure. Okay, so it really, a lot of the messaging is about just that kind of sticking together, sharing information.
It's really the rate card project is to get people to agree on norms, and then what we do is we're giving out rates guidance.
Right.
Our view is that you can't have good rates guidance until you've got everyone sticking together on norms. So until people have an idea of what, if you don't have a single understanding of what a working day is, it allows essentially 30% of variance in the value you're giving, depending on your understanding of what the day is. So our position is norms first. Once you've got norms agreed, then branches should be issuing rates guidance, not publishing rate cards. So the aim is to get it so that people are beginning to stick together privately. Then once you know that they're sticking together privately, then what you do is you then publish a rate card, and then you start doing no undercutting campaigns where you're encouraging people to turn down work below the rate and tell everybody and get the credit for it, which people like doing.
Yeah.
And then the next stage is to have a published rate card that we start to go to employers with.
Brilliant.
So our ADs branch now want to get to a position where the electricians are in, where the electricians have got a negotiated rate. The electricians don't bargain for their rates at all. They, people employ them on that bargained rate. I think people are actually in the call already.
Okay.
Okay. So
should we give it a few more minutes, because it's not even past yet? So if we wait till maybe 33 or something like that, just to get any stragglers.
Are people actually on the call at the moment, Paddy?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We didn't realize that people had actually come on the call then, so we were just chatting about what we were going to do on it.
Yeah, apologies for that, Paul. That's my fault. Apologies for that.
Okay, got 62, 63. They're all flooding in. Okay, let's have a look. It's 9:31. We'll give it to. Shall we give it till about 9:35? Does that make sense?
I'm happy with whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. We're expecting a few more, so I think it's probably best to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay. I see someone's got their hand up. If you've got something to ask, could you put it in the chat, please? If you look at the bottom of the screen, there is a chat function. If you've got a question, please put it in the chat. Someone's saying they'd like to know if we can find out how many people on this are production and how many are ADs, and can we do a show of hands? Yeah, that's a nice idea. Let's do that at the start.
I could run a poll if it'd be easier, Paul.
Can you set them up now?
Yeah, shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, I thought you had to set them up beforehand, but if you can set them up now, that's great. Thank you. Just reading through the comments. All the comments are saying good morning. Yep. You're being asked there, is that the throat? You're being asked here by Lawrence. So let's see, Sarah. Is that the... Actually, let's do it. Let's see if anyone else... Oh, no, it's too late. He's done it. He's done it in the chat. So is that the throne room from Blackadder 2?
It is indeed.
There is somewhere online where you can get all of the Doctor Who sets, the BBC.
Well, It's one link. It's the BBC archive, and I think it's called Empty Sets, and somebody sent it to me. And you can go from Doctor Who through Strictly Come Dancing. I spend quite a lot of time in the kitchen of Ab Fab with the champagne behind me. But yeah, you get to move where you are on any given day.
I'm afraid mine's so unadventurous. All I've got is the Nottingham Forest ground. Okay, so everybody can see that there is I hope you can all see on your screen there is a poll. If you could vote in the poll. How many responses have we got, Paddy, so far?
We've got 83 out of 97, and it is going up. So there's only a few people who haven't done it.
Okay, so everybody, if you can have a look, the participants number is still creeping up slowly. So we're on 101 now. We'll give it. In fact, what's the poll like now, Paddy? I think we need to get started.
Okay, I'll end the polling.
Okay, let's see the result.
There you go.
Okay, so not far off 50-50, and we've got some others. If you could say in the chat which departments you're from, if you're not from the other two. I know this was advertised specifically just for assistant directors. Oh, right. Emma Jones is saying producer director in docs specifically, which department you fall into. I mean, I'd say for the purposes of this meeting, it's the production meeting. It's production one. Edit producer. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I mean, some people who are edit producers, for instance, would be in our post-production and facilities branch, but we are also doing some campaigning and organising across factual TV. So you will be covered by that. Casting director, we would treat that as being part of the production branch. An associate producer is definitely part of the production department, production branch. Okay. All right, I'm going to close the poll on my screen anyway, and let's get cracking.
Okay.
Good morning, all. Thank you for coming on the call during this horrible period of time in our industry. I hope everyone's bearing up well. I hope everyone's looking after themselves. As part of during this period, many people have come to us and said that now is a good time for us to sort a few things out that people have been too busy to do for a long time. We find it quite hard to organise our members and get them to work together on rates for the reason that they're so busy working such long hours most of the time. And all of a sudden, we have now 13,000 members in London Production Division, all of whom have a lot more time on their hands. And one of the issues we've been asked to raise to sort out by our members is how to get people who work in the production department to have a more effective rates strategy, whether it's a rate card or a rates guidance, but a strategy really to get it so that people in the production department aren't having their wages eroded, aren't stuck in a race to the bottom in terms of wages and terms and conditions. But in addition, we've been asked to address the issue of long working hours as well, because I know that in particular in scripted TV, I've been talking to production coordinators who work 16-hour days. It's just absolutely crazy. And then having to drive to and from work at the end of those, before and after those days as well, can make it even worse. So we're working now with some members from our production branch to come up with a rates strategy. And it's a rates strategy that's designed to also make long working days more expensive, to incentivize employers not to ask you to work long working days. And the way we're doing that is, in our view, we have a lot of members contacting us saying we need a production rate card. And I definitely agree you need a production rate card. But if you have a rate card too early, the rates on it are often too low. So in our view, the correct way and the best way to get a production branch rate strategy working is firstly to get everybody to agree on what the working norms are. Ask people to stick together saying, if we have to work longer days, the longer the day, the higher the rate. And get that agreed first. Get a strategy. So a lot of people are saying, I will charge a higher rate for a longer day than I do for a shorter day. And if you don't do that, then if I say to two different people, will you come and work for me tomorrow? The rate is £200. depending on what the definition of a working day is, it can mean you're giving 30 or 40% more value for that £200. So our first position is that our members should, and our anyone who works in production should be thinking about how they negotiate to make sure that a longer day is paid for a higher rate. And a really important part of that is knowing how to deal with that phone call of an offer of work. And that's going to be the main subject we're going to talk about today. Our aim is to firstly agree norms, then agree rates guidance. So we're going to be asking people to have a bit of paper in their pocket that they'll be able to pull out so that they know how to negotiate on the number on how much they're going to charge for the day. Once we've got people sticking together and we can publish a credible rate card, and you can only publish a credible rate card if the rates are ones that people are actually sticking together on, then we'll publish a rate card. And really, the most important part of this is that we can only help people stick together if people are really good at sticking up for themselves. One of the most important parts of sticking up for yourself is being able to deal with that phone call that offers you work, being able to negotiate, how to not be a pushover when that phone call arrives, how to be able to pick that phone up and reach a good deal for the employer. Because remember, a lot of employers think it's a good deal for them to get you working a 12-hour day, but it really isn't. Your quality of your work goes down, your productivity goes down. What we're looking to do here is enable employers not to be stuck in this race to the bottom where they have to compete with each other on how many hours they get out of you for a relatively small amount of money. So on that basis, there are meetings being planned at the moment on towards getting us to a agreed set of rates guidance for the production department. Do watch your inbox for those if you're a Bectu member. You will be invited to take part in those, and nothing that we publish on our rates guidance will happen without it first being seen and signed off by our members. So do watch your inbox. I'm going to hand over to Sara Putt now. Sarah, I think Sarah is, whenever anyone talks about agents in London, they always say agents, like Sara Putt. I think people sort of define the agent by this is what an agent is like. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Sarah's done a large number of really good seminars for us for different departments, and you'll see that some of our departments have really respected rate cards. Half the people on this call are ADs, assistant directors. The ADs branch already have a good, well-established set of norms for their work. So how many hours they work for the day, and they have a rate card that is very respected these days. 5 years ago, they didn't have one at all. Generally now, when I speak to productions, they tend to say, well, we just pay your rate card, don't we? There does seem to be the rates strategy seems to be working largely. We are working on steps with the ADs branch to improve that and to get those rates to become more respected. But generally the rates the rate card on the Bectu site is a lot more observed than it was a few years ago. Okay, Sarah, let me hand over to you if you'd like to.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you guys for inviting me today. And as Paul said, I hope you're all doing okay. It's not easy. It's not an easy world that we're all living in at the moment. But one of the things that actually has amazed and really impressed me is how many communities are being created and how people are coming together. And I really hope that when we all go back to work very soon, I hope that some of that good stuff remains with us, and some of the things that we've learned about sticking together, about communicating, about sharing, which I'll come on to talk about, that those things go with us as we go blinking out into the sunlight again. So anyway, I'm now going to do the techie stuff, and hopefully this will work, and share my screen. So hopefully now, is that working? Everybody can see? I'll presume that that's all fine. If nobody's squeaking at me. So let us begin. Negotiation. Sort of what is it? I think people when they know they're going to get that call about a job, or they do get that call about a job, or they know they're going to have to go and have a conversation, they kind of see negotiation, as I put on the title screen, as some kind of dark art that is mysterious and alien to them, and not something they ever do in their normal lives. But actually, the definition of negotiation, the dictionary definition, is to reach an agreement or compromise by discussion. And I think there's obviously some key words in there. Agreement, and that is either an agreement that you will do the job, or actually it can equally be sometimes, and we'll talk about this, an agreement that you're not going to do the job if the deal is not the deal that you feel is an acceptable one. And it is going to be about compromise. It is absolutely going to mean your position may be having to shift a little bit, and their position having to shift a little bit, so that you come to something that feels fair to everybody. And that is going to be by discussion. That discussion can be on email, it can be face to face, it can be a phone, but it is going to be a to and fro, a communication. So basically, negotiation is problem solving by another name. And you guys in production, ADs, whatever role you have, you're amazing problem solvers. That's what you go out and do all the time. You solve creative problems, you solve logistical problems. I mean, at the moment, everybody is working so hard on solving that huge problem and challenge of how productions can function in a sort of COVID compliant kind of way. Negotiation is just another set of problem solving skills and tactics. And all of you in your day-to-day lives, you negotiate all the time. We negotiate with our children, with our parents, with our partners. We negotiate about whether we're going to go and watch a rom-com or a horror film. We negotiate about whether we're going to have a Chinese takeaway or an Indian takeaway. And we all have very instinctive strategies that we use for kind of getting what we want. So it's good to sort of look at your own behavior and work out what those strategies are, because often we go into work negotiations and we sort of forget all about those strategies, those things that get us what we want when it comes to a takeaway on a Friday night. So first of all, when you're thinking about negotiation, it's worth thinking about what kind of negotiator you are. And I think an awful lot of freelancers feel that they are very defensive negotiators. That, their standpoint is, it's all about you. I'm never going to get what I want. It's over before I've started. Why am I even trying? Because I'm just going to be sort of beaten back and I'm not going to get any of what I want. So you've sort of given in before you've started. Because a lot of defensive negotiators feel that the person they're going to be talking to is going to be an aggressive negotiator. And there are some out there. And aggressive negotiators are just that. They're pretty aggressive. It's all about me. I'm going to get what I want, whatever the cost. I don't care about you. And aggressive negotiators are very short-termist. Because actually, if you win on this occasion, if you, at whatever cost, get what you want, those conversations are going to come back again in another form, on another job, at another time, and people will remember. And aggressive negotiators don't build long-term relationships because nobody really wants to deal with them. And if, when times are busy, as times have been, and hopefully will be again, you have a choice, then aggressive negotiators are probably not the kind of people you're going to choose to work with. So really, the aim here is to find a way, as much as you can, of becoming an assertive negotiator. Somebody who can see that there are two sides. Somebody who can say, it's about both of us. We both need to feel we've gained some of what we want. I'm going to be calm, I'm going to be reasonable about this, but there are certain things that are my lines in the sand, and we will come on to talk about that. So yeah, being assertive is the way to go if you can get there. And negotiating is really a voyage of discovery. And your job is to find out as much as you can about the other person's position, and then judge what to reveal about your own. So negotiation, bizarrely, is way more about listening than it is about talking. It's about actively listening. And by that, I mean concentrating, really engaging with what that person's saying, how they're saying it, what might lie behind that, what their rationale for saying those things is. And that way you will pick up clues. If you do too much talking, and I think a lot of negotiators, both defensive and aggressive, go into negotiations feeling, I've just got to do loads of talking. I'm a defensive negotiator, I'm feeling really scared, so I'm just going to kind of blah on everything that I want, and then that way I'm sure that they will have to listen to me somehow. And aggressive negotiators are like, okay, this is the deal, dum 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 dum, take it or leave it, I'm out of here. But the assertive negotiator listens to what's being said, writes their notes, then engages in that conversation. So how do we get to being assertive? You know, it's not easy, doesn't happen overnight. And there are positions where, you know, it's not going to work perfectly, of course. However, some of these I hope may help you a little. It's about assessing the benefits against the costs of negotiating. Is this job an absolute necessity? Or is it an opportunity and there may be other opportunities? Know your limits, be kind to yourself. Don't expect, you know, that you're going to walk away with the moon on a balloon. You just have to know how important this job is for you. What are the benefits of doing it? What are the costs of not doing it? Because if you really think those through sometimes, actually you'll put yourself in a more powerful position than you think you might have been in. So yeah, look at the situation. What does it look like from your point of view? But also, what does it look like from their point of view? What's in it for them? Do you think, have, you know, 6 other people that they could go to who somehow are going to do this job for less or work longer hours? No, not if you're all communicating, and we'll come back to talking about that in a little while. But what is that situation from their point of view? Understanding the other person's point of view. And I don't mean just in an aggressive way, I mean actually in an empathetic way. Understanding their point of view can really help push that negotiation along in a much more collaborative way. So as I say, empathize. How are they feeling? What do they want to avoid? What will reassure them? Are there places that you have common ground? And start with those when you're negotiating. Start with what you agree on rather than what you disagree on. Remember to ask for help. And when I say ask for help, in the sense of how can we make this work? It's not them and us. It's not you and me. It's us. We have a situation here. You have a job. You want a good person to fill that role. I'm a good person who can fill that role for you, and I would like a job. So we have a shared common interest. We're actually on the same side of this problem solving. So we, rather than you and I. And as I say, look at the total deal. Negotiate on all the elements together, one by one. If you could do this, then I could do that. If you would agree to a 10-hour day, then I would be able to do it for a slightly lower rate. Whatever it is that you're negotiating with, you may have things that are not so key in those terms for you that you would be prepared to negotiate on, you would be prepared to compromise on and give way on those for something in return. So look at that whole deal as a package when you're negotiating. And as I say, try and start with the things that you agree on. And it, you know, even if that's like literally the number of days or number of weeks they want you on, it sort of eases everybody into it before you get onto the things that there may be a gap you've got to bridge. And there are many elephant traps when negotiating, and I've spent 30 years as an agent negotiating on behalf of my clients, and most of these both myself and my clients have fallen into at various points. So these are all down here because of experience, bluntly. Expectations drive behavior. So much of negotiating is in here. Believe that you're a good negotiator, and you will be. You will be much better than if, as I say, you're that defensive, negative negotiator who believes it's all over before you enter the room. And don't catastrophize. What I hear a lot from freelance clients is, yeah, but if I ask for more, they'll think I'm greedy. If I ask for more, they won't give me the job and they'll never employ me in the future, and they will tell everybody else that I'm greedy and I'm unreasonable. As long as you know, and we'll talk about this, that there is a logic and a reason to what you're asking for. You're not just plucking some random figure out of the air because you happen to have woken up thinking about it. If you're being reasonable and you're entering that negotiation in a reasonable way, then A, most likely they won't go and blacken your name around the industry, and they won't think you are being greedy. And bluntly, if they do think you're being greedy and incredibly unreasonable, then actually, are they the kind of person you want to work with anyway? Because you have to value yourself before you can ask other people to value you. So you have to know that you're worth it before you can ask other people to pay you the amount that you actually are worth. But don't have a completely rigid mindset. Don't be that aggressive negotiator. Be flexible. Be prepared to discuss things. And as I said, don't start off with where you disagree. Begin with where you agree. Try not to get blown off course by aggressive negotiators. Stick to what you want to say. Do your prep. Know what it is that you're going in for and try and stick to that. Be prepared to have a conversation. As I say, be flexible, but don't get thrown completely off course. You know, some aggressive negotiators come at you like a machine gun with this whole deal of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There's this, there's that, the other, but is that all okay? Because quite frankly, I'm really busy and I've got lots of other people to talk to. Slow it down to your pace. Ask them to go over things. Make sure you understand what is being offered and the implications of what is being offered. It's not about winning and losing. Try to get that out of your head. A lot of people get to feel so personally about this. Of course it's personal in that it's your income, it's the terms and conditions under which you're going to work. But if you can see that actually this is a business communication, this is business to business. When I say negotiators, if you're asking for somebody else, what I mean is you guys, all of you in essence as freelancers, run your own business. That business may be Jane Smith Limited, but it is still a business. And Jane Smith Limited offers services to the industry in production, in assistant directing, as a casting director, whatever it may be. And you, when you're negotiating, are negotiating on behalf of your own little business, Jane Smith Limited. And therefore, this is a business proposition. It's not the same you as sits in the pub when, please God, we can all do that again, with your friends on a Friday night. This is the business you. This is the managing director of that company, the marketing manager, the finance director, because God knows as freelancers, you have to be all of those. So yeah, negotiate as if you're asking for somebody else. Try and ask open-ended questions. Questions that don't all have a yes or no answer. You know, ask people how they've got to that figure, what they'd think if you did this, would they mind if, all of those, you know, provoke conversation rather than people just being able to say yes or no. Don't back yourself into a corner. And please don't mimic aggressive behavior. This one is really, really easy to do. And when somebody comes at us aggressively, we respond in an equally aggressive manner, even if it is not in our nature to be aggressive, because we think somehow those are the lines that have been drawn for this conversation. Now, don't do it, because quite frankly, if you're dealing with somebody who is an aggressive negotiator, you're never going to manage to equal their stance. You have to find your own. You have to find that way of being assertive. Don't be provoked. Be firm but pleasant and stand your ground. It is perfectly possible, and it takes a while, and it's taken me a while, but you know, I almost take perverse pleasure now when dealing, and quite frankly, it is often with our friends at the other side of the Atlantic in big studios. When dealing with negotiators in some of the studios, they are extremely aggressive. And it makes me come over so nice and speak so calmly to them, because that's the way that I find it most effective to deal with it. If I tried to be as aggressive as they were, they'd just have me for toast, bluntly. So stand your ground. And as I said, don't take it personally. In the end, most of the time, these are just people doing a job. Honestly, they've been tasked with doing this. They've been tasked with a budget, told to get these people at these rates. And they're perfectly decent human beings who go home to their children, their cats, their dogs, and are really nice. So please try not to take it personally. See it in that business-like way. It will help you, I promise. Language. Now, you know, some of this only applies to the spoken word, but a lot of this applies to whether you're going to be negotiating by phone, face-to-face, or by email. Honestly, lower and slower. Like I said just now, when I'm dealing with aggressive negotiators, I'm inclined really to slow it down. When you speak slowly, when you speak in a lower voice, you sound more authoritative. The danger is for all of us, and particularly for all of the women on this webinar. And again, I know this because I do it myself. When we're nervous, when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling defensive, we're inclined to talk a lot faster, we're inclined to use an awful lot of words, and our voices go up and we sound a hell of a lot less authoritative. So if you can just really try and practice to speak more slowly, to speak more calmly, then you will be more effective. And whether you're doing this on the phone or by email, fewer words. Sometimes you just need to quit while you're ahead. You don't need to justify everything. You don't need to double excuse yourself. Use fewer words. It sounds a lot more imposing in lots of ways. And in looking at using fewer words, you can remove a lot of times words like just. I just wondered, I was just hoping, I just thought, I hope you don't mind me just asking. It's a really kind of disempowering word. And I'm sure there are others as well. That's just an example that always strikes me. I would suggest in any email, in any conversation, you can literally look at your email and go, I can remove any use of the word just. And it's not only that it won't make a difference, I think it will actually improve the flow of that conversation. Phrases like with all due respect, I think on the whole are very, very passive aggressive and slightly put people's hackles up. Because what it basically means is, I don't respect you at all. I think you're trying to get one over with me, on me. And I'm really feeling slightly teed off about it. Whereas there are other words like willing that sound much more positive. I'd be willing to look at it in a different way if you could do this. Yes, but means no. It's kind of really teenage expression. Yes, but it just means no. So again, I'm not saying don't use it, but think about how effective it is. And much more positive phrases, it seems like. When you're trying to kind of understand what I was saying right at the top, gaining clues, understanding the other person's position, what is it they're actually saying? What is it they actually want? If you take what they've said and say, it seems like what you're saying here is this, 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 and this, then sometimes you can help to point out the unreasonable nature of their position or the illogical nature of their position when you unpack it. And it's always reasonable to ask, what's that based on? You can ask them to basically explain their workings out. If they're offering a figure that is lower than you were expecting, that seems unreasonable to your evidence, to your understanding, ask them what it's based on. And in keeping it open-ended, perhaps we could look at it like this. Might there be another way to skin the cat? How would you respond if I were to say? All of these are just phrases that keep that conversation flowing and can be really useful. So there's potentially a job on offer that you're going to have a negotiation around. Before even going in to have that negotiation, I think it's useful to actually have a think about why you are going to take this job. What is going to inform your decision to take or turn it down? because your career as you go along is going to be defined possibly as much by the jobs you don't take, as much by the bullets you avoid, as the ones you do take. So what will you be giving? You'll be giving your time, your skill, your sheer blood, sweat and tears oftentimes, your talent, your creativity. And what will you be gaining out of that? Now, this might just be a money gig. You don't particularly love the script, or it's not a subject matter and factual entertainment that you're particularly keen on, but you know it's got a big budget. So you're doing it for the money. So that is your priority on this job. Or are you doing it for prestige or contacts or actually sheer enjoyment because it's with really nice people or it's on a subject you really like? Know what your motivation is. To go back to the beginning, that's about, you know, the benefits of negotiating against the costs of negotiating. Because yes, of course you want to have a successful career. Everybody wants to have a successful career. But I think you've also got to try and remember to have an enjoyable career. You spend a lot of time at work. You should be able to be nurtured and gain emotional satisfaction as well as financial satisfaction by doing that. And sometimes the jobs that on paper have biggest price ticket and are the most sparkly are not actually the nicest jobs. You know, as Paul was saying earlier, it's about the terms you're going to be working under. Yeah, it may sound like a good price, but if you don't know how many hours you are actually going to be expected to work, not just even in the contracted hours, the culture of that job, the culture of those shows, what hours do people really work? What's happening out there? Try and do that research. And before you start that negotiation, know your walk-away point. And everybody needs to know their walk-away point. If you don't know your line in the sand that will make doing this job unacceptable to you, then you will find that you will just get pushed further and further into that area of no man's land. So really try and think about what that walk-away point is for you. And as I've kept on saying, it's all about the preparation. The same as with a shoot, the same as with a show. It's all in the preparation. If you do that well, the actual event, the actual negotiation is going to go an awful lot better. So the deal, are you going to do it by phone? Are you going to do it by email? An awful lot of people say that they want to do it by email. They feel much, much more comfortable. If they don't have to talk to somebody, they find that, excuse me, just let me, a lot more threatening. That's fine. Ultimately, you must absolutely do what you feel most comfortable with. All I would say is that people can be much more aggressive, much more easily in writing. Sometimes if you do things on the phone or even face-to-face, they're not at the moment, but if you do it on the phone or via Zoom, then you can have that conversation with people. You can build that rapport with that other person who you are doing the deal with. And they will therefore be much less aggressive. They will come to know you. They will want to help you out as you will maybe want to help them out a little. It can humanize it. So maybe have a think about it. Take your time. Don't be steamrollered by those aggressive negotiators, but also don't be forced into doing a negotiation while you are pushing your trolley around Sainsbury's and you get that call. Say, oh my God, that's so exciting. I'm really, really interested. I'm just in the middle of something. Give me 20 minutes and I'll call you back. Take that time. Value yourself. People say, oh, but you know, somebody won't wait. Yes, they will. They will wait 20 minutes. And if they won't wait 20 minutes, again, be wary. They're crewing up really late. They're being aggressive. They're trying to catch you on the hop. You know, most sane, decent people, even for a job that is, you know, happening in the short term, will wait 20 minutes. Get yourself back to the car, into a coffee shop, wherever it is. You know, I have my day book that, oh, you can't see because I'm green screened out. I have a book that I carry with me all the time in my bag. And at the back of that, I have a template of all the things I'm going to ask for in any negotiation, which we'll come on to look at. But I would always want to get to a place where I can refer to that, because although I've been doing it a long time, there are still things I might forget. So get yourself somewhere where your thoughts are in order, you've got that reference of the things you want to ask for, and you can have that conversation or compose that email in relative calm. Do those who name their price first lose? You know, some people feel that they want to go in there and they want to name that price. Here's my price. I'm not doing it for a penny less. And that's fine. And if you feel that works for you, absolutely be my guest. However, like I said earlier, so much of this is about listening. So much of this is about understanding that other person's point of view. Not too long ago, I was doing a negotiation for one of our young directors of photography, and he'd been working on, you know, quite low budget indie movies, and he was now being offered a movie that was like £20 million. And we had a discussion, we sort of looked at rate cards, and he knew what he was hoping for, and I had that in my head, that I was going to do that, have that conversation on his behalf. And off I went to speak to the line producer on that film, who I knew to be, you know, quite a feisty negotiator, shall we say. And he wanted to know my client's rate. And I went back and I said, well, you know, I can share that with you, but it's not relevant because the projects he's been doing are much smaller. So what I'm asking you is, what are you expecting to pay your director of photography? What have you got in your budget? And fair enough, he told me. And I kid you not, the figure he told me and shared with me was £1,000 more a week than our bottom line would have been. So by keeping my mouth shut, my client earned a lot more money. He thought I was a genius. I did have to confess it hadn't exactly been difficult and I hadn't broken into a sweat, but it is that sort of power of listening, like the power of silence, which I'll come on to in a minute. In terms of you know, what you want, it is about understanding that marketplace and understanding what your colleagues are earning, what precedents there are, what quotes people are happy to share with you. And this is all about sharing information. One of the things I've really seen shift in the industry in the last few years, I think in a really positive way, is that people are prepared to share industry information about rates. And that is going to make your positions much, much stronger. Industry standards, comparisons, what are friends and colleagues earning? Do they think that's reasonable? Do they not think it's reasonable? But have that internal logic. Again, the more you know about what other people are doing, you don't have to name names, but it is perfectly reasonable to say, I know that production coordinators on similar shows with similar budgets are earning this for 10-hour days or whatever it might be. Have your evidence and your arguments. Your negotiating position is going to be so much stronger if you have evidence and argument to back up what you're asking for. Paul talked up at the top about sort of rate cards for the production department. And I think, yes, that would be a fantastic thing in due course. And it can so often be about the power of silence. A lot of negotiators use silence as a weapon because we're all terribly nicely brought up and very polite, and we sort of feel embarrassed when there's silence. If I just now stop talking, and that was about 5 seconds probably, and it feels really weird and it feels like dead air and it feels embarrassing. So when somebody just says, no, I'm afraid I can't do that, I'm sticking to my figure, and then they're just silent, everything in you is kind of going to go, oh, okay then, right, well, you know, no, I mean, I understand that, and that's fine, I'll agree to what you're asking for. But if you can hold your silence, then you can sometimes, not always, but you can sometimes get somebody else to move their position. So just kind of practice, play with it if you can. And as we said before about knowing your walk-away point, know and believe that sometimes it is okay to walk away. And the other thing about walking away is that's very often, and I'd say nearly 50% of the time, not the end of the conversation. It really, really isn't. And I see this so frequently with our clients and in the negotiations I do. You do have to sometimes end up going, I'm sorry, I know we've tried really hard and I really respect your position, but I just don't think we're going to be able to bridge that gap. I don't think, it feels like you're going to be able to move to the figure that I believe is the right figure for this job on a weekly basis or a daily basis. And you part pleasantly, not aggressively, no phone slamming. And so often, a day later or later that same day, that person will call back because they have spoken to a couple of other people and they've got the same information. Those other people have said, no, I'm not going to do it for that either. So they come back to the person who is the producer or the director's first choice, and they come back to me as the agent and they say, okay, right, well, I've looked at my figures and I think we can probably do something here. So walking away sometimes is the end, but is sometimes actually just part of that negotiation. It's hard to have the courage to do it, but like I said earlier, you have to value yourself enough to do it. Otherwise, why are you asking other people to value you? So if it has been successful, keep everything agreed in writing. And by that, I don't mean that trail of emails because you did this negotiation by email, that trail of emails that goes back, 10 days and covers about 30 different points on 30 different emails. Really, don't leave it at that. Don't think, oh, well, that'll do. I've got everything in writing. And I have so seen that with clients who've started a negotiation on their own and then something goes adrift and they kind of come to me and go, but it's okay, I've got it in writing, Sarah, and then present you with this sort of sheaf of emails that you're trying to flick through to find what bit relates to the other. Keep it all together. Keep it all in one place, whether you've negotiated on the phone or by email. Write it down. We'll come on the next slide to look at one, but in the form of a deal memo. And keep that simple and straightforward. And as I've stressed on several occasions, however the negotiation ends, whether you're going to do the job or not do the job, conclude it amicably. The likelihood is in our industry that whoever you're negotiating with, you'll bump into each other again at some point soon. And the situation may be different, the power dynamic may be different, but it's good to leave relations on a positive and amicable note. So this deal memo is sort of roughly based on actually fairly closely based on the one that we would use at work. And so for those of you working in non-scripted, apologies, I think a lot of this is relevant, but some may not be, because our work is predominantly in scripted, in high-end TV and in feature films, and in independent films as well. But I hope that the nuts and bolts of it, and certainly the principle of having a deal memo and putting everything clearly like this, is one that applies to every freelancer. Now, good production companies will get you a deal memo. A lot of them are generated electronically through one of the engines these days, but it's still worth you having your understanding of that deal. So what's the name of the production you're going to work on? What's the name of the production company? Who is actually employing you? Because often, particularly on a film, that won't be necessarily the name of the film company who interviewed you. They will set up what's called an SPV, a single purpose vehicle, which is a limited entity for the making of that company, and that's where all the production money will go. So it's just useful to understand who is actually employing you. What's your role? What is expected of you? What is your credit, including the positioning of your credit, particularly when you move into more of a head of department position? What other grades are you going to have parity with? If you're a production office runner or a production secretary or a third AD, who should you be getting the same kind of money as? Do you want to reference that in a deal memo? Did you, when you were doing the deal, say, yeah, I'm coming onto this as a runner, but, and I will accept this rate. I think that's a reasonable rate, but I just also want to clarify that I will be getting at least the same as all the other runners on the show. So those kind of things. The dates that people are going to expect you to be employed from until, and the weekly rate. And most importantly in this, as Paul said, the number of days per week, the number of hours per day. What are you actually giving? Because sometimes the rate can sound great until you literally start taking it apart and work out how many hours that you're going to be working for those people. And what's your daily rate, including 6th and 7th days? Are 6 days time and a half? Is it double time on a Sunday? Be clear about those things. And what's the overtime rate? Is it capped at a certain amount as per the Bectu agreement in television, etc., etc. Equipment, always worth putting down. If you're providing any equipment or box money, if you're in costume, makeup, etc., will you get paid an allowance for your mobile phone, for your car? What about travel, accommodation, per diems? Again, parity or favoured nations. Are you getting the same per diems? Are you getting the same rights to accommodation and travel as other people in other departments at the same level? Insurance. Who's insuring what? This is going to become, increasingly relevant, in terms of insurance and your responsibilities in this sort of post-COVID world we're all going back into. What can you be held responsible for? If you get poorly, will you be paid? If you get poorly, will you still be able to retain your job? If you're asked to self-isolate, will your job still be waiting for you? All of those are conversations that we're all going to have to start to have. What are the termination terms? Usually in this industry, it's a week, but often that's not mutual. The production company can give you a week's notice for pretty much any reason they choose. You don't have to be in breach, they can decide. In the standard BBC contract for a long time, there was a clause that said that the BBC could terminate your contract at a week's notice for any financial, editorial, or other such substantial reason. So they can get rid of you, but in a lot of contracts, you are on a fixed term period. You don't have a right, unless they breach the contract, to give them notice. So make sure you know what it is you're signing up for. And what are the payment terms? Are they going to pay you weekly? Are they going to pay you at the end of the month after the month you started working for them in? No, don't get caught up in, oh, well, I thought you'd pay me weekly. Oh, no, if you look at the contract, it actually says that we won't pay you. Oh, but you haven't given me the contract. So that's why if you do all of this, then you can flush this out early on. Prep and wrap time. I think it's actually very, very relevant for production offices in particular, because you will do so much more than those shooting hours potentially. What are the expectations around prep and wrap time? I have seen contracts whereby they try to get production office teams to sign up for an additional 90 minutes prep and wrap time. No, that means on a 10-hour shooting day, you're actually giving them 11 and a half hours. It's the production office, you don't need to prep and wrap in that way. No, that should be overtime. And anti-bullying policies. What are their anti-bullying policies? How do they adhere to them? What is the paperwork around that? We always put in our deal memos that we ask the production to adhere to the BFI BAFTA anti-bullying guidance and principles. And actually, nobody ever really questions it. And it's just useful to have it in there. And what is a contract? And when does one exist? All a contract is really is an agreement between two or more parties for the doing or not doing of something that has to be specified for consideration. And in legal terms, consideration, basically, originally, many, many years ago, that could have been a sheep or a cow. I will mow your lawn, you will give me a cow. But actually what it's come to mean is money. So if you have made an agreement in the form of that deal memo, and you have got agreement to that deal memo, then in essence, a contract exists. In principle, a contract can exist on a verbal agreement if it's specific enough and if it was witnessed by another party. So it has to be specific enough, it has to involve money, and it therefore can create an agreement that is then enforceable by law. The contracts you get given are the written forms of such agreements. which can basically be deal memos. But make sure you know what that contract says as and when it arrives. And if it's handed to you on set on the second last day of the shoot, please don't just sign it. Take it home, have a look at it, have a read, take your time. Again, good production companies should give you, and it's something a lot of us are fighting very hard to get, that contracts, and they have got better, are given to you before you start shooting, and you can have a chance to go through it and ask questions. You know, quite frankly, a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff in a lot of contracts is bunkum. It doesn't need to be there. It's legal verbiage that has just grown up, you know, over many iterations of the same agreement. And if there's something that you feel concerned about or you just don't understand, ask them to explain it. You have that right. And if they're decent employers, they will be prepared to have that conversation. So you agreed your terms and you're doing the job. And negotiations sadly doesn't always end there, because, you know, I'm not going to go into great detail because it's a whole other session on its own, but how to handle those difficult situations can be some of the most challenging negotiations that one has to have. You know, I think it is worth having a look at those anti-bullying and harassment guidelines I just mentioned, and also having conversations with Bectu and all the material that they put out and all the support they give around, you know, what you have a right to expect. And as a bottom line for everybody, we have the right that where we work, our workplace is a safe space, because that's also economically more sensible. If we feel safe, if we feel able to express our opinions and bring ourselves in an honest way to work, then we're going to be more creative. We're going to be more effective in the workplace. But sadly, workplaces aren't always that completely safe space. A lot of people still, I think, don't know about the Film and TV Charity Helpline. So the Film and TV Charity is there to support workers in the industry, and their website's great. And also they have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week helpline. That's the number there, 0800 054 0000. And they can put you in contact with financial help, with legal help, with emotional and mental welfare help. It's a fantastic resource. Please do access it if you need to. And is it ever okay to leave a job before the end? Another form of negotiation, you know, probably not so much at the moment, but certainly a few months ago in scripted, when it was really busy, people were jumping ship and moving from job to job. Yeah, you should know what that contract says. Are you actually allowed to hand in notice of a week? And keep those relationships going. Don't be that bolter. Don't be that person that everybody says, oh, well, they'll just be off onto the next better job. If a production that has a relatively small budget has treated you well, has treated you decently, has done their best to give you the rate you wanted and the terms that, you know, allow you to get home at night and see your family and have a life and not be too exhausted, then I think it's just important that you treat them with the same respect and don't necessarily just jump ship because the huge jobs come sailing along that might want you. So just think about those long-term loyalties and relationships. How, in its essence, it's just that sort of very human thing of, I guess, treat other people how you would want them to treat you. And if you are going to leave, I would suggest you always ask. Say, look, this has come along. It's a really big opportunity for me. It would see me through the winter. You know, I know it leaves you in a difficult place, but, you know, I'll help to fill my role. There's some people I know who'd be really, really great to take over from me. So ask, don't tell. And get feedback. You know, negotiate with yourself as to what you could have done better on that job, what you were really good at. Ask, you know, whoever's in that department above you, your line manager, whomsoever, for that feedback. It can be incredibly instructive. Constructive criticism can really help you to grow and get better and better at what you do. And have your own career strategy. Know what it is you're heading for. Have goals. What do you want to achieve? You know, we run a trainee scheme, and every year with our trainees, We always ask them at the beginning of the scheme to put down what their ambitions are, where they'd like to have got to by the end of the scheme. And it's amazing how very frequently they get there. But if you don't have those ambitions, then how will you know if you're achieving what you want? How will you measure your own success? And how will you also know in any given negotiation about a job why you would be taking that job? Is that job moving you further towards those career goals? Is it not? So what does the future look like? Speculate on it. And that way, you'll progress through the industry, and you'll also be able to kind of increase your rate and push things forward. And you'll manage to have some control and some choices, and you'll then be able to manage those choices. And your career will feel like it has a forward trajectory, and you'll feel like you are getting somewhere and moving. And then the other thing that is hugely, hugely important in terms of the hours you sign up to, in terms of the weekends where you're that one sitting in the production office when, do you know what, you just shouldn't be. And if that's what's needed, they need extra people in that production office, because you need to have a life too. Otherwise you will burn out. And the thing that I think a lot of us felt we were in danger of seeing from a lot of freelancers before this happened was real burnout. That those who were working so hard and pushing themselves because the industry was so busy and scripted. And that wasn't a good thing either. So keep that sense of proportion, keep that balance. You will be better at your job, and employers, as Paul said right at the beginning, will get way more from you. So really, I think it remains to say good luck. And I'm going to stop screen sharing now. And any questions, which I think Paul or Paddy have been keeping an eye on.
Yeah,
hello.
sure.
Is everyone to sleep, or are you all alive still?
We've got 7 questions in the Q&A box at the moment, so I'll run through them. But if anyone on the webinar at the moment does have any questions, just pop into the box, and hopefully we'll have time to get round to them. Okay, Sarah. So the first one is from Paul Murphy, and he says, "What does Sarah think of finalising negotiations via email? So you've had the phone chats, you've gauged the people and projects, and had a vague discussion about the rates. I like to finalise everything via email, as there is thinking time and no pressure for an answer straight away." He'd like to get your thoughts on that, please, Sarah.
I think finalising by email. Can you hear me? Because it was coming up that my speaker wasn't working, but you can hear me. I think finalising by email, as I said, and pulling it all together is a really useful thing to do. I think you need evidence of it somewhere. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Sorry, Paul, are you saying something? You're on mute there.
If I could add something there. Well, there's two things. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We have to finish the call at 1:45, so we've got 15 minutes Q&A. But just something else on that. One of the things we're considering with our, particularly for people working in factual in production, as part of the rate card, we're also planning to issue a standard set of terms and conditions that people can have, as it were, on their website or in the footer of their emails, so that they can say, these are the terms that I generally work on. We often advise members to send their understanding of what they've agreed to an employer, as you know, when they've had an offer. I don't know what you'd think to that, Sarah, if you think that would make sense.
Yeah, I think that makes huge sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the next question is from Francesco and reads, "Greetings, Sarah. Thanks for doing this talk today. It's very informative. If a line producer insists that you name your price at the beginning of the negotiation, would you simply recommend naming a higher starting price than the job would ordinarily pay, or just insist on hearing what they are offering?"
I try and insist as much as you can, but I absolutely agree. There are some line producers who just will not tell you. And I would probably myself be adding a little headroom in if I could. But I would also, it's that, again, show your workings out. Why is it? Presumably you have something in your budget for a first assistant director. Why is it that you don't want to share that with me? Isn't it going to short circuit it if you just tell me what you got in to do the job? And try and flush people out that way. But yes, ultimately, if I am pushed into naming a price, I may put a little headroom on it. It will depend on who I'm negotiating with and what I know about that person and their negotiating stance as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So Anonymous says, do you think we can renegotiate rates on a job secured before COVID that was put on hold when it comes back? The rate that they negotiated at the time was down by £50 a week. They wouldn't meet me in the middle, which would have brought it down to £25 a week. No contract has been signed, but the rate is in writing via email.
I think it's a tricky one. It's how honourable you would feel about doing that, and whether your conscience feels that's okay. And to a certain extent, I think they're all better off, because really nobody can honour, not for anybody's fault, just because of a global pandemic, the dates. In the end, you did a negotiation for a set of dates, which presumably did not then come to pass. So in essence, this is now, one could argue, a new negotiation under different circumstances. And if, for example, and I'm not sure that this will happen, but if quite a few jobs, certainly by the end of the year, beginning of next year, all went together, then actually it becomes more of a seller's market again, rather. So I think on the grounds, if you felt that there were specific dates, and those had not been honoured because of COVID, and that in this essence, this was a new negotiation altogether, the old one was dead in the water, then there's no reason you couldn't sort of try for that increased rate again.
So Francesco asks, how can you bring your experience as a negotiating tool? If you're bringing, say, 25 years experience to a job, can that be used in negotiation?
I would always talk about it with clients, yeah. And I think particularly, with assistant directors, first assistant directors on shows post-COVID, I think your wisdom, your experience, your understanding of the choreography of sets and where people need to be and how they can be safely encompassed in physical spaces, I think all of that is incredibly important. And it's certainly something that if I were talking on behalf of my clients, I would be referencing, yes. And it's also why that I think it's really important, for sort of junior and certainly entry level technicians to try and kind of get trained up. Screen Skills are offering free training in sort of COVID protocol implementation. And they're doing basic training online. I think it will be up and running by mid-June. Get yourself onto that. I think, the more you can upskill in those areas, the more you can prove your usefulness in what is also going to be, a much more stressful and difficult environment until we all get used to it as well. And really bear in mind specifically when you're negotiating, that how are you going to be protected? What are people's expectations? Because shoots will go slower. They just won't be able to shoot as much as fast. And what they can't do is then just lengthen those days at either end in order to encompass the fact that everything's going more slowly. And I'm sure Paul would agree. I think we all have to be really careful about this.
So Peter asks, would you advise we all ask what budget band the project is in? As often companies UK companies seem to be reluctant to divulge.
I know. So there's certain companies who seem to consider it to be insulting that we might ask what their budget is. Absolutely. And I would push further than that myself. Within band 2, I would want to know kind of where they're placed in band 2. Because there is a big difference between a show that's under £1 million and a show that's knocking on the door of 3 million an hour. So yes, I think that is an important conversation to have.
So Jessica asks, as someone working in production, even despite the Bectu agreement detailing overtime and prep and wrap, I'm often put in a position where I'm expected to waive my overtime and work a buyout. How would you begin that conversation to start moving away from this?
It's a really difficult one, Jessica, because, I fear it may be one of those that at times is going to involve you, in that negotiation, walking away if people aren't prepared to budge. But I think this is a situation where it is about all of you guys in production sticking together and having those conversations. This changes when that production company starts to realize that they're not going to get anybody to do that job on an overtime buyout. That you will, of course, be reasonable. And if half an hour was expected, you know, one night, you would do that, and you probably wouldn't, because you're a decent person, charge for it. But it cannot be an expectation. It absolutely can't be. So more communication and as much sticking together as you can do, honestly, that is what for other departments has helped to start to change things.
I mean, if I could come in on that, if you're working under a Bectu agreement, it doesn't matter which department you're in, the agreement applies to you. And, you know, I think, I mean, I know we're talking about the diplomacy of how we say it here, but fundamentally, I think the question is, you know, would you ask an electrician to waive their overtime? Would you ask, or is it only people in the production department who have to not do this? And the second question is that because we don't stick together in the way that other departments do? But it's certainly a breach of the contract, because when you're working under a Bectu agreement, the combination of the deal memo and the Bectu agreement is a contract of employment. Yeah. And it's a breach of that contract of employment. And even if halfway through the production they ask you to sign their own contract, the Bectu Pact agreement is that contract can't offer any detriment to the agreement that you've signed with the Bectu Pact agreement. So, I mean, I would really say that stress that you are working under the Bectu Pact agreement in the same way as someone in the camera or the sound or the costume department or the electricians and grips department are.
So Rebecca Kenner asks, how do you manage production managers who bring up COVID-19's impact on the industry as an excuse to offer lower rates?
Yeah, I've already been there and got that T-shirt. I think it's about sort of, again, show me your workings out. You know, why are you asking me as an individual working on a show to somehow bear the cost of the fact that ITV's advertising revenue may be down a little? You know, their shareholders aren't, their managing director isn't. If I would want to know what had changed in their budget, why their budget was smaller, and it's just not on the situations I've had. I'm afraid I have pushed back fairly hard. It's been with editors doing shows during lockdown. You know, if I know that show has a tiny budget and my client, you know, wants to do it and is doing it at home and it's not long hours, you know, and everybody agrees on a reasonable deal, then fine. But somebody who is basically coming along and saying, well, I know your rate is £200 a day, but because of COVID, I only want to pay you £150 a day. You know, that's not an argument to me. That is a non-argument.
So Matthew asks, does experience equal better rates? And if not, how do I counter this? I stepped up as a first AD 4 years ago, and while very busy, I sometimes face being offered a lower rate than firsts with 20 plus years experience in the same role.
Again, it should be about the job. It should be about what is a fair rate for doing that job. You know, if you are capable of doing the job and they believe you're capable of doing the job because they're offering the job to you, and you are going to bear the responsibility that any first, whatever their CV has on it, is going to bear on that same job, then I think it is reasonable that you are paid a going rate, a reasonable rate for that job. Okay, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, for very, very experienced first ADs on very big budget jobs, they might get, you know, extra because probably not even so much their experience, but because that given director desperately wants to work with that first AD and will fight for them. Yeah, that might sort of add in essence like a bonus payment on top, but that doesn't mean that you with at the moment less experience should be being paid less than the job merits. You should absolutely be being paid what the job merits. And I think the argument from your end is, you trust me to do this job, I'm taking on the responsibility of doing this job, I'm only asking to be paid the going rate for the job.
So we've had a few requests for people who would like access to the slides that you've used today.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What I can do is I can just send them out to all attendees, I don't think that should be a problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I see you all out there doing webinars on negotiating, I know who you are.
Okie dokie. Well, thanks very much, Sarah. I think we are going to have to wrap it up there because someone else is going to be
Cool.
account soon. Thanks so much for that. That was really, really interesting, very informative. Paul, have you got anything to say before we say goodbye?
Just one thing. There is a small change in legislation that's taken place in April, that was due to take place in April, and I'm sure it will effectively come into effect once everyone goes back to work. It is now a legal requirement for an employer to give you a statement of particulars before you start work. That was in the past. It used to be you could have a verbal agree, essentially a verbal agreement was a contract of employment. If I say, come and work for me tomorrow for £100 and you say yes, that's a contract of employment. There is now a new legal obligation on employers to give you a written statement of particulars before you start work, which is a step forward. It's broadly what the deal memo has done in our TV drama agreements, but I think it's something else. Okay.
Good.
I'd like to really thank Sarah for doing this. It's an amazing bit of work. I think it's something that there's nothing that will improve our rates. The rates and terms and conditions people work under better than individuals being stronger as negotiators themselves. And you'll notice that, I mean, some of you who work in production will know that some departments have a reputation for being good negotiators. And generally, people will they won't ask an electrician to work below the electrician's rate card, and they won't ask a grip to work below the rate card. Increasingly, in some cases, they don't ask ADs to work below the rate card, and there are a number of other departments. How about that reputation for sticking together and doing it? It will be absolutely wonderful if the production department also had that reputation, and that means as many of you being able to learn, use the lessons of what Sarah's given you, but also to work with us in the union to get a good, effective rate card that people stick together on and people respect. Because if we do stick together, and we've seen it happen so many times, it is possible, and it's something we can do. We can keep doing. So let's do it for the production department as well as everybody else.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paddy. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to see you.
Paul, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.